In California, the mountain lion is something of a local celebrity. Elusive and mysterious, it's like a secret neighbor that's often talked about but seldom seen. Unfortunately, scientists have discovered that some populations are threatened. In this series, we will learn the keys to understanding these beautiful and essential animals and how we can coexist with this legend of California. Mountain lions are a vital part of California's ecosystem and exist in every part of the state. From the coasts and the Sierras to the southern deserts and the northern redwoods. By using motion capture cameras and GPS collars, we can take a closer look into the lives of these lions. The mountain lion is a legend with many names: cougar, puma, and panther, just to name a few. In fact, mountain lions have more names than any other species in the world, which only adds to their storied presence. There are three major threats to California mountain lions: car accidents, genetic isolation, and depredation permits. Even though California is the only state where pumas are protected from sport hunting, depredation permits allow them to be shot if they've killed livestock or pets. Car accidents happen when lions try to cross a major highway. They try to cross in order to maintain their large territory or to discover a new home. Mountain lions are considered apex predators and reign supreme at the top of the food chain. The adult male is a powerful animal, often measuring over 8 feet long and weighing up to 200 pounds. Their front paws are equipped with 5 retractable claws, ready to strike in an instant. They can kill their prey with a single bite to the back of the neck. Mountain lions feed primarily on deer, although females will eat smaller prey, anything from coyotes to wood rats. Their leftovers are an important food source for birds and smaller animals. In order to survive, a lion must remain fierce in the face of confrontation, but also know when to strategically retreat. With full bellies, pumas will then bury their meals, an instinct called caching. They will then return to feed for up to a week, getting the most they can out of the animal. In spite of popular belief, mountain lions do not roar. Instead, they have many different ways of communicating. A mother makes chirping sounds to collect her wandering offspring. Whistles, growls, purrs, and chirps are some of the few sounds cougars can make. A female will give birth to a litter of 2 to 4 kittens who will stay with her for 1 to 2 years. After the kittens are strong enough to walk on their own, Mum will teach them how to hunt. Even as they become more confident in their survival skills, kittens are still vulnerable to threats, which can be anything from coyotes and bears to an encounter with an adult male of their own kind. The abundant presence of humans means that California lions live with high risk. Crossing freeways, being the targets of depredation permits, or experiencing a slow decline from habitat loss, isolation, and inbreeding. Mountain lion attacks on humans are extremely rare. As naturally solitary creatures, they prefer to avoid humans at all costs. In this series, we eradicate harmful myths about lions and hope to ensure the survival of their species. It's important to learn as much as we can about these legendary creatures. California's ecosystem exists in a delicate equilibrium. It's crucial to understand how each species participates in our local circle of life. As a top predator, mountain lions play a huge role, so it's critical to collect as much data as we can to ensure their survival for future generations.
So much of science kind of de-individualizes whatever it is we're studying. And one thing I love about studying lions is that we get to know them as individuals and we get to know them as a population. So how do we get to know them as individuals? Well, one is that we actually capture them and put these collars on that allow us to track them and see where they're going.
There is a careful process to capturing wild lions. The first step is locating them. Scientists will go into an area to look for tracks and set up trail cameras. These cameras help determine how frequently the lions are present. Once their presence is confirmed, a trap is prepared which can be walk-through cages, the use of hounds, or bait.
So we use roadkill deer that we are able to get from the state and have permission to be able to use those. And we'll go into that area where we found the tracks and wire that deer to a tree. And then we put a camera on it, a trail camera, so we can get some indication of what lion it is that comes in. And we also attach a transmitter to it. And so that way when the lion comes in and starts tugging away on that deer to try to eat it, and he's moving it around, he pulls a little trip on the transmitter and we get a signal knowing that we have a lion there. We go back in with a big cage trap. They're about 5 feet long and about 2 or 3 feet wide and high. And we put the cage trap right where we had the carcass that it was feeding on. And then we take that deer carcass that it's already been eating, we dice it up into sections and wire that to the back of the trap.
When the trapdoor closes, an alert notifies the scientists that a lion has been caught. This usually happens at night, when the lion is most active and searching for food. The scientists then begin a workup, which is similar to a procedure at the hospital. However, dealing with these patients is not as simple.
Well, the first thing we have to do, of course, is the mountain lion is not going to be real happy with us just fiddling with it, so we have to anesthetize it first.
The sedated lion is then carried to the predetermined workup area, and special care is taken to ensure the lion's safety.
We have a patient monitor, so we can hook it up the same as you would have an animal in a hospital or a human in a hospital.
It is during the workup that scientists are able to gather important data about the lion's health. Body measurements are taken to determine the lion's age. A good estimate comes from measuring the wear and tear on its teeth.
We have an ear tag in them and a tattoo of their ear, and that way, when their collar drops off, either because we command it to fall off or it's reached at the end of its life, then if that animal is ever caught in the future, we can either see the tattoo in its ear or the ear tag and know who it is. By collecting data on things like the blood that gives us the genetics, we can look at how the mountain lion populations are interacting. The health information will let us know what diseases are these animals exposed to, and in some cases, if they don't show any exposure to certain diseases, that's actually more of a risk, because if that disease comes in there, they have no antibodies to be able to fight it off.
So we genotype these lions and we know every individual by its DNA. And then by studying their DNA, we understand how this lion is related to this lion. And we've been doing this work long enough now that we know 4 generations of lions. These lions all have told me stories as they've gone through their life, and I've followed their movements, maybe remotely through a computer, maybe in the field, but also through molecular biology. And we can see who was successful. Who did you mate with? Oh, so that time those 2 dots came close together on a map, this male and this female, this youngster was a result. DNA has given us the ability to understand families. Prior to starting to study mountain lions, I'd seen 3 in my entire life, and it was always a glimpse as they moved across a road at dusk or at night in some backcountry area. So if that's your only view of lions, what can you say from that? Well, a lion was here and it was going that way, or it was going this way. But what we really need to know is, how many lions are there? Are they established here as residents? Are they passing through?
Scientists are unsure of the exact number of lions in California. However, in certain areas, studies have shown that their populations are at risk.
Everybody has to have the same information. So to me, that's my role. That's our role with this project, is to provide information and make it available to everyone. It's the common currency that allows you to then make decisions based on your own values or your own perspective.
Only with access to accurate information can we ensure that mountain lions continue to live and thrive as California's feline royalty. For the California mountain lion, when it comes to love, romance can be fleeting. They have the same needs as any other animal, and to reproduce, they can't do it alone. Continuing the species can be a challenge with many obstacles. However, it's an essential part of the circle of life. When the female is ready to mate, she has her own special siren song to lure in potential suitors.
When she wants to attract a male, when she comes into heat, then she vocalizes. And their vocalizing can be quite loud sometimes. Many people have equated the vocalizing of a female mountain lion in heat to a woman screaming.
Sometimes you have to be loud to get attention. Looks like someone's heard her call. It's time to get down to business.
When they go through the breeding process, they usually are together up to a week, and they breed multiple times during that period. When the female then breeds and has the kittens, they're with her for a year and a half, approximately on average. And so that means that the breeding opportunities for the male and the female only occur every couple of years.
She goes through a pregnancy period of 90 days and then has between 2 and 4 kittens on average. When the kittens are born, Mom will nurse them for about 12 weeks, but to keep her energy high, she occasionally has to leave them and search for food. Looks like these curious kittens are hungry. After they're weaned, Mom will either bring small prey to her young or will lead them to a kill site. She will repeat this process until the babies are old enough to accompany her on a hunt. They will learn all of their survival skills from Mum and pass those skills down to kittens of their own.
Well, the mother and the kittens have a very close relationship because the female takes care of those kittens for essentially a year and a half, which is a long time for offspring to be dependent on or circulate with a mother among animals, among wild animals. So the mothers are very good mothers.
Father, however, rarely plays a part in the kitten's upbringing.
Except when they mate, they stay apart from each other, and actually a female will do everything she can to avoid a male. Intraspecific conflict is a big deal in lions. Male lions will kill other male lions, and male lions will even kill female lions. So females basically avoid a male unless she wants to mate with him.
In a few rare instances, father will join mother and kittens for a family meal. Unfortunately, adult males are far from being the only threat to young kittens. On average, fewer than half of all kittens survive to adulthood.
Well, as real young kittens, they're susceptible to predation from a number of other animals. Environmental threats include hypothermia from sudden snowstorms. They can be threatened by fire. Wildfire, of course, is a threat throughout California, and they may not be able to move away from it.
This period of susceptibility is quite a long time for a mother to protect her kittens, but she stays determined. However, Mom will only give her kittens a free ride for so long before they must learn to fend for themselves.
They are completely dependent on her for that first year and a half of life, and then they get booted out, more or less. She's going to have another litter, and it's time for them to go establish their own territory. And they don't have GPS, they don't have maps, and this is when they end up in places where they shouldn't. They don't have a clock or a compass to tell them when or where to go. They just go in random directions.
Setting out on their own is a big life adjustment for the young lions, one which males and females handle differently. For both, their first priority is finding a new and sustaining territory.
Males have a larger territory typically than females. They tend to have territories that butt up against each other, but they mark their territories with urine or feces.
Females, on the other hand, set up their territories closer to their mothers. This can negatively affect the diversity of the local gene pool.
The females, because they can come into heat sooner, they may even breed back to their father in some cases, especially in cases where the territories are limited by geography. In our study area and others in California, oftentimes the populations are squeezed by development and roads. The males end up overlapping a lot with their offspring because the offspring cannot go very far to set up their own territory, the female offspring.
For some California mountain lions, it's difficult to find territory where potential mates are not close relatives. If they can't find a mate outside of the family, they'll settle for one within.
When they have the reproductive issues, it's called inbreeding depression, and if that sets in, our models of population trajectory tend to suggest that population has a high risk of extinction.
With lions facing multiple threats, it's more important than ever to keep habitats connected and accessible in spite of urban development. Mountain lions, like humans, need to reproduce and ensure living heirs for the future. In the words of one famous lion, we are all connected in the great circle of life. The mountain lions of California are an incredibly adaptable species. They can live in almost all parts of the state as long as there are adequate resources available. The mountain lion's elusive nature has shrouded them in mystery. Fortunately, many have made their secret homes in the Golden State. Even though lions can live anywhere food is available, a number of additional challenges arise with each unique California landscape.
In the low desert, there's relatively low levels of prey, so they have to circulate over much larger physical areas to acquire enough food. Up in the high Sierras, they have to deal with snow. They have to deal with other restrictions. They may do more scavenging of winter-killed deer, for instance. In the coastal regions, they have to deal with humans at much higher densities, so they have to be much more versatile in their use of what habitat remains.
What challenges mountain lions in Southern California face as far as the road structures and areas being built out for new housing and all of that keep chipping away at places where they can exist?
They have to cross roads to find their own place to live, and lions get killed in unacceptably high numbers on our highways.
Crossing busy highways is a huge risk for all wildlife, and some areas prove to be more problematic than others.
The Santa Ana Mountains are bordered on all sides by Los Angeles, the San Diego, Temecula area, and these animals are just surrounded by human influence. And crisscrossing this little bit of habitat they have left are these large freeways, and that really is starting to divide them.
They are becoming more and more genetically isolated, more inbred, and thereby that may change physical characteristics such as hair patterns or tails and things like that.
This artificial separation by roads and development is starting to create different genetic subgroups of mountain lions. This image reflects the genetically distinct populations in California. While these subgroups benefit from being specially adapted to their local environment, a complete lack of mixing within the species can be genetically dangerous due to inbreeding complications.
Broadly speaking, it's important that there be this mixing across California, and our studies suggest with the geneticists that we worked with, Holly Ernest and Kyle Gustafson, that the population, the total population of mountain lions within California is divided into some distinct groups.
These groups are already showing low survival rates, and as they become more isolated, they could disappear completely.
In order to try to combat this isolation by roads and development, we are working with civil engineers and Caltrans and other highway agencies to develop plans to enhance the ability of animals to move across roads.
A healthy, flourishing California depends upon wildlife and their habitats remaining connected. As dominant species ourselves, humans can respect and preserve the fragile ecosystems shared with other apex predators. Join us as we dive deeper into the subpopulation conversation on the next episode of California Mountain Lions. Mountain lions are territorial animals by nature. Once they reach adolescence, their instinct is to find a territory to call their own. Dispersal helps maintain a healthy and diverse gene pool, but as human populations increase, available habitat declines. And for some mountain lions, this could mean the collapse of their population. One of the greatest threats to mountain lions in Southern California is the car.
If these animals can't cross the freeway and maintain their populations, they're going to suffer in terms of decreasing population size, decreasing genetic diversity, increased risk of disease, and all of these things have the potential to wipe out a species, at least in a local area.
In the last decade, the subpopulations in Southern California have struggled. To keep a healthy population, researchers determined that every 1 to 2 years, at least one male must migrate in from another population and reproduce with the local lions. Based on combined survival rates and genetic studies, only a small percentage of migrating males have succeeded. Over the last 15 years in the Santa Ana Mountains, just one documented male has made it. Migrating to find another territory enables these animals to breed with new lions. However, when habitats are hard to reach and movement is restricted, inbreeding can occur.
So when you have inbreeding in populations, you have mating between more genetically similar animals, and what this leads to is a reduction of the overall genetic diversity in that population. And when you have reductions in genetic diversity, you lose that raw material on which natural selection can act upon. So we care about not only keeping these important members of the ecosystem in place in Southern California, but also using lessons from Southern California and these more threatened populations to inform conservation of other populations across the state of California. So we can use the genetics of the animals themselves by looking at the genetic information from their DNA, which provides sort of a fingerprint of that individual animal. And using this, we can determine animals that have migrated between different populations and look at movement across the landscapes that way.
Mountain lions are naturally wide-ranging and can survive in most areas.
There's a lot of concern about what we call corridors and maintaining connectivity between these large patches of habitat, and that's important. We definitely need those big areas of federal land or private or state land where lions can survive.
A major focus of the Nature Conservancy's efforts in the Santa Ana-Palomar linkage has actually been in ensuring that we have protected lands on either side of the highway. Making sure that our protected lands are connected is vitally important to the assurance of safe wildlife connectivity over the long term.
There are very few crossing points across I-15. One of the corridors lies within the Santa Margarita Ecological Reserve, located in Temecula, California.
We're kind of this last little bit that's undeveloped that is there for the animals to move back and forth between these two habitats. And the biggest problems we're having, especially in the last 10 years as the cities of Murrieta and Temecula have exploded, is literally having so many people so close to this corridor and wanting to interact within the corridor.
This underpass, designed to help wildlife cross the freeway, is not being used as expected.
We have people living underneath the freeway, and we have people tagging and setting fires. The humans use that at the times that the animals want to use it. They use it, late at night. It acts as an impediment for the animals. The animals don't want to interface with the humans, and if the humans are there when they're trying to get through, they can, cut off that linkage.
In Southern California, we have a limited time because the development pressures are so intense to conserve the habitats we need and to construct the wildlife crossings that are needed across these major highways to secure connectivity over the long term.
In recent years, UC Davis Wildlife Health Center has partnered with highway agencies to improve safe migration for all wildlife. On the 241 toll road, which passes through the Santa Ana mountain range, a 12-foot fence was built along a 6-mile stretch of highway.
This fencing is designed to keep wildlife off the highway. And there's also jump out points and gaps in the fence so that if an animal does get on the highway, they can find their way off of it again. But the idea is that we're trying to use this fencing to funnel animals to safe crossing areas.
Humans can also benefit from these wildlife safety corridors. The more animals that use them, the fewer vehicle collisions and potential injuries. Despite decades of conservation efforts from government agencies, development poses an increasing threat to wildlife interconnection. Only by respecting legally protected corridors can we sustain California's natural ecosystem. Life as we know it is a balancing act comprised of thousands of organisms. From the smallest microbe to the tallest redwood, each contributes in its own special way. And in California, the mountain lion helps to maintain this balance at the top of the food chain. Mountain lions are considered local legends due to their mysterious and elusive nature. But they're also considered legendary for their massive contribution to the ecosystem.
The reason that people should care about mountain lion populations is primarily because they are a top regulator of the ecosystem. They are the top predator and in our ecosystems in most of California.
In any food chain, apex predators have the ability to affect the entire ecosystem, creating a trickle-down effect. By consuming a variety of prey, and in turn providing food sources for many scavenging creatures, the mountain lion's influence is substantial, and their loss would be detrimental.
By removing the pressure on prey animals, whatever they may be, then they can increase in numbers, and then that can have effects on the system, oftentimes negative, because these systems evolved over millions and hundreds of thousands of years, and disrupting them has consequences.
Just as mountain lions impact the species below them on the food chain, they too can be affected by the prey they eat.
They also are sentinels for exposure to rodenticides, to poisons that are put out with a target of rodents, but we have found that those poisons move up the food chain from the rodents to the smaller predators to the larger predators. And since mountain lions eat medium-sized predators like coyotes, skunks, and things like that, they are accumulating these poisons. So they're an animal that helps tell us that these poisons are more widespread in the environment than we think they are.
We were probably surprised at finding so many mountain lions that were positive and finding such a variety of anticoagulant rodenticides. So the real question was, where were they being exposed? And it wasn't really obvious. Both in bobcats and mountain lions, we find the greatest variety of different anticoagulant rodenticides in the same animal. So we've actually had some animals where we found 5 different anticoagulant rodenticides, which we don't find in other species.
When we have mortalities in animals, that gives us the opportunity to actually open up the animal and see with our eyes the tissues and any abnormalities in the tissues, maybe some damaged tissue. And then in addition, we take tissues for diagnostic testing, as well as small tissues representing all the organ systems in an animal, and look at the slides microscopically for any kind of abnormality or change that points me in the direction of the cause of death.
Besides poisons, pathogens are another threat that can reach mountain lions through the food chain.
Epidemiology is a huge part of this study and our work with mountain lions in general. So disease is a huge threat for all wildlife populations. It's a very natural source of mortality. Epidemiology is the study of disease transmission through populations.
Interestingly, a lot of the viruses that we're finding in mountain lions may have started in cats. And so in areas where mountain lions and domestic cats are in close contact, there's a high risk for them to consume the cats, come into contact with domestic cats, and then acquire their infections. In another situation, we found that a bobcat virus that's similar to human immunodeficiency virus, or HIV, that occurs in bobcats can be spread to mountain lions. So we're finding really interesting information about the historical nature of viral infection in these populations, and that actually the mountain lion, being a top predator, is at risk for viral infections from the prey species that it's eating. And if that changes from the typical deer and elk, which is their normal prey base, to more domestic animals like domestic cats, it may have implications for their future survival.
Infectious diseases can have an impact on wildlife, but also be infectious to our domestic animals, livestock, as well as humans.
As humans encroach upon wild habitats, mountain lions are attracted to livestock or domestic animals and are more likely to catch and spread disease.
When wildlife and domestic animals and humans all converge together, it's a hotspot for disease transmission. And this is a big concern in epidemiology and wildlife health in general.
We can be changing the habitat, for example, of deer, and they may be more concentrated and more highly populated, and that increases the chances of infection and transmitting infectious diseases. So there are a number of different possibilities of something that we are doing that could increase the impact of an infectious disease on a wildlife population.
Our ecosystem is like a house of cards. Take out any species and the entire system can collapse.
We definitely don't want to be conducting natural experiments by removing this top predator and seeing what happens. We would much rather retain the top predator, make sure the system stays stable.
You know, as humans, we really like to think of ourselves as outside a lot of the rules of nature. So we live in our cities, we go to the store to get our food, we go inside when it rains or it's cold, but we're really at the mercy of Mother Nature just as much as any other animal.
What's going on in the mind of a lion? It's a question that I ask myself all the time. What I love to do when I'm out in the field is get down on all fours and look through the grass and see the world from what a lion sees. One of the first things you see is that people have affected the landscape all around us. So how can we live with lions? From a science perspective, that's one of the things our research tells us is those lions are out there in that environment.
In this ever-changing world, it's easy to forget that we're not alone on Earth. As we continue to fragment our natural habitat, we affect the native species, including mountain lions. Sometimes this leads to wildlife encounters. Other times, it results in species extinction. Human encroachment is forcing mountain lions to adapt to our presence. We too must adapt and recognize their point of view.
Mountain lions in California commonly see humans, so they see us regularly. They perceive us as something different. They don't normally perceive us as a prey animal because attacks are so rare.
Anatomically, their eyes are perfectly suited for hunting in little to no light. Even the slightest motion will catch their attention. And in the eyes of mountain lions, humans are trespassing in their territory.
They do not see us as food. That does not mean they don't occasionally attack a person under one odd circumstance or another. But statistically speaking, in the study that was done by Ken Logan and Dave Mattson and looked at 100 years of attacks by mountain lions, and the numbers were small even over the course of 100 years, they did find that risk factors included small stature, erratic or rapid movement, and potentially defending a domestic animal that is being attacked by the mountain lion.
The challenge is recognizing that the lions were there first. It comes down to a value judgment. If you want lions to be part of our system, then you're going to have to accept them as part of the system and accept yourself and your domestic animals as part of the system.
For unprotected domestic animals in California, that system can be unforgiving. What humans view as pets, mountain lions often view as prey.
When these animals are pushed up against a human environment, they have a lot more opportunity to come across unprotected domestic animals. So that could be a small herd of goats in somebody's backyard. It could be a cat that is wandering the neighborhood. It could be a dog in a backyard. These aren't natural prey sources for the mountain lions. They're not what the mountain lion is out looking for. But because the mountain lion habitat is so tightly now interwoven with these human modified landscapes, they're coming into contact with these unprotected domestic animals more and more often, and that provides opportunity.
I decided when I was doing a presentation with the 4-H club here locally that I would do a little test with them and see if they got it by bringing pizza to the meeting, and I sat out a couple of pizzas on a table and didn't say anything else about it. Then I asked, did you help yourself to some pizza? Then I asked, did anyone tell you that that pizza was for you? That's what they're doing to their lions, except when their lions help themselves to what's accessible at their house for their dinner, they get killed for it.
To go get a chicken, that's the easy way out. Their main diet is obviously the deer, so you don't present them with an option. And once you do, you don't go kill the animal because it's doing what it does.
I equate lions with like teenage boys. They're going to get in trouble. You give them enough opportunity, they're going to do something that someone won't like. It's just their nature. They're predators.
When lions prey on unprotected livestock, it can cost them their lives.
Under current California state law, if a mountain lion kills either livestock or a domestic pet, the owner of that animal can apply for a depredation permit. And that permit will allow them to go out and trap and kill that particular lion that killed their property.
The top causes of mountain lion deaths in California are vehicles and depredation permits.
If you have outdoor animals, like outdoor dogs or outdoor cats, the best thing is to bring them in from dusk till dawn, either into your home or a barn, something that is fully enclosed.
Only by taking precautions and building the necessary structures can our domestic animals exist peacefully in the presence of wildlife.
You got to deal with your responsibilities, your animals, whether that's goats, whether it's sheep, chickens, whatever you got. If you live in lion country, you got to protect them. And you can't go kill the lion just because they do what lions do.
If we don't want lions to kill domestic animals, and we don't want lions killed because they kill domestic animals, we have to take responsibility and ownership for that. It comes first and foremost by valuing our place and the wild animals' place in the system and recognizing that we can change, but they can't. And in talking to ranchers and rural people, most of them want lions to be part of the landscape. They don't want to kill every lion. They would actually very much like opportunities to have lions coexist with them and their animals. So let's find a way to make that happen.
I guess I wouldn't really want to be living in a state or in a world where I didn't know there were mountain lions out there. I mean, to me, they're just such a majestic and important component to the ecosystem that I want to be in places where there are lions.
Throughout the course of this series, we've had a first-hand look into the unique world of California mountain lions. Each episode has elaborated on many parts of puma biology, social structure, and even how this data is collected, all culminating in the final and most important question: what next? There is no doubt that apex predators are valuable to the ecosystem. Those aware of this value are less likely to act out of fear. Therefore, education is key. And in California, there are many organizations working toward the conservation and understanding of mountain lions, including the Southern California Puma Project, based out of UC Davis.
One of the most important things that we discovered studying the mountain lion populations down in Southern California, around Los Angeles and San Diego, was that they had a significantly higher mortality rate than we expect, given that sport hunting is not allowed in California. What we found is that most of the animals in our study area were either being killed from collisions with vehicles on highways or being shot under depredation permits for killing livestock or pets.
California Fish and Wildlife, the Mountain Lion Foundation, Living with Lions, and many others are trying to provide alternatives to depredation permits by speaking with those who've encountered a loss.
There's a real challenge to bringing information to a community and creating a way for a community or a neighborhood to have a long-term solution to potential conflicts with mountain lions.
There's no question that it requires effort to live in lion country. Since protecting domestic animals inevitably results in protecting mountain lions, it's a win-win situation.
Living with lions, it's this need for us to learn to coexist with not only just mountain lions, but other wildlife. Because mountain lions are kind of this umbrella species in this area. And in a way, I suppose, the living with lions or the coexistence ideas can be a metaphor for us all to even, coexisting with your neighbors.
In rapidly developing areas such as Southern California, mountain lion populations are separated by major highways and human development. The Nature Conservancy and National Park Service are helping to connect these fragmented habitats.
In the last 30 years or so, the Nature Conservancy's efforts in the Santa Ana-Palomar linkage have focused on conserving key parcels in the linkage to ensure that wildlife can safely move over the long term.
We've been working with California Department of Transportation and many other partners in the area to build a wildlife crossing across the 101 freeway, which would connect the Santa Monica Mountains to the Simi Hills to the north. We've identified the location based on over 2 decades of research of carnivores in the area, and it's something that's greatly needed for our local wildlife.
The research may be clear, but the real question is, can we coexist with mountain lions?
Humans can live with mountain lions in a number of different ways that help to minimize conflict and especially minimize the likelihood of the animals going extinct in certain regions. Number one is to protect their animals just as they would protect their animals from disease with vaccination. They should protect their domestic animals from predators with proper housing and proper husbandry.
Number 2 is to be alert and aware during dawn and dusk recreation when lions are also active.
So the next living with lions tip is to know what to do if you encounter a mountain lion. And so if the mountain lion doesn't immediately exit the area just from seeing a human, which is their natural thing to do, then humans should make themselves as big as possible, as loud as possible, make sure the mountain lion knows that they are not prey, they are not a deer.
Throw things, though be careful not to crouch down, and most importantly, do not run. If children are present, pick them up and back away slowly.
The mountain lions aren't looking to harm people. They just usually stay away from people because we're just too weird. You know, they see us and just go like, I don't know what that is, but I'm not going to get close to it.
While lions have a lot of support from dozens of organizations, what about the public? What can an individual do to help?
Do I value lions as part of my landscape, as part of my neighborhood? And for a lot of people, it's a resounding yes. But if you just ask and answer that question and you stop there, that's not a guarantee that it's going to happen, because there has to be some proactive steps taken if lions are going to persist.
To be proactive in puma conservation, learn what you can do at home, in your community, and in local politics. At home, avoid using anticoagulant rodenticides, which can work their way up the food chain.
There are some things you can do that might make your house less attractive. For example, don't leave domestic animals outside at night.
In your community, talk to your neighbors and encourage action toward conservation.
Just because you want lions to exist in your area, if your neighbor doesn't, then it's probably not going to work. So you need to approach this from a community level.
And finally, take political action. Many policies related to mountain lions, such as development decisions, are determined at the local level, so go out and vote.
Let's make policy and implement policy that represents the values that people have and that promote lion conservation.
Even though mountain lions are elusive and rarely seen, most Californians want them to remain part of the ecosystem. But solving these kinds of problems is hard, while finding common ground is even harder. The next step is to take action and find a balance between ourselves and the legend of California. Connection, a word with many meanings. As human beings, we connect to our friends, our family, our community. Instinctively, we nurture these connections to build happy and meaningful lives. In California, several mountain lion populations are separated by a force greater than themselves. Lacking connection and genetic diversity, they face not only isolation, but also extinction.
Because they require huge amounts of space, they occur at relatively low densities, and they're one of the first species to really be affected by urbanization and urban sprawl because they require so much space.
The biggest threat of the human population growth in California to the mountain lion and other wildlife is loss of habitat and loss of connectivity between habitat patches. In other words, it's really hard to get across our roads and freeways.
Occasionally, a large natural structure such as a river or valley will limit gene flow among populations, but not to the extent we are observing in California.
The absence of connectivity between certain habitats has led to 10 genetically distinct subpopulations of lions in California.
When you look at the genetics of animals throughout the state, as you see which populations are sort of more threatened than others and how populations are clustered according to geographic features and highways.
Scientists are now predicting local extinctions of some of these genetically inbred populations within the next 50 years if humans don't do anything to facilitate gene flow.
Specifically, these 6 populations are surrounded by highways and human development, making migration nearly impossible and ultimately leading to inbreeding depression.
This is when the genetics of a population becomes so limited that rare genetic mutations come together in a homozygous state and produce abnormal physical characteristics. When this occurs at the population level, the populations can no longer sustain themselves. The mountain lion populations in and around Los Angeles, San Diego, and Santa Cruz appear to be at the highest risk.
In our study area in Southern California, the Santa Ana Mountains population is very squeezed by Interstate 15, really between Interstate 15 and the ocean, and development on the north and the south.
Specifically looking at Southern California, the Santa Monica Mountains are isolated from the Santa Ana Mountains, which are isolated from the Peninsular Mountains by freeways.
Further east lie the San Bernardino and Eastern Peninsula populations, which are separated by the I-10 freeway, development, and the desert.
Our main study area is in the Santa Monica Mountains adjacent to LA. It's roughly 300 square miles. You can think of it as this island of habitat, bordered on the south by the Pacific Ocean, to the east by LA, to the north by major freeways and development. The west has agricultural fields. So it's this island of habitat completely surrounded by development and freeways.
What the 101 did in development in the area is, for the first time, cut the Santa Monica Mountains off from the rest of the world. And 10 lanes of freeway is an impenetrable barrier. So what you have is the population of mountain lions south of the 101 can't get out. Most of them die trying.
Both of our populations have recorded some of the lowest genetic diversity ever recorded outside that of the Florida panther that went nearly extinct.
This habitat fragmentation is all over the state. Interstate 5 is a huge barrier between the Central Coast population and those in the Sierra Nevadas.
Our study area is the Santa Cruz Mountains, basically the mountain range that's bounded by San Francisco to the north, the Silicon Valley to the east. And Highway 17 bisects the Santa Cruz Mountains, and Highway 101 sort of forms a ring around it.
It may look like these lions are doomed, but there is hope. Several organizations are working towards reconnecting these wild places. One of their key challenges is acquiring the land on either side of the highway.
The reserve was established in 1962, and the mission of the reserve is conservation, preservation of biodiversity, and habitat connectivity. And so we play an important role as a linkage between the Santa Ana Mountains and the Palomar Mountains. We're not set up to do recreation. We're not a park of any kind. We're set aside as conservation, set aside as habitat connection.
Now that we've secured key parcels right at the I-15, we're working with UC Davis, who is doing more direct studies to evaluate what types of crossing structures can be installed along the highway to allow safe passage for mountain lions, deer, and other wildlife.
UC Davis is working with engineering faculty and students from Cal Poly Pomona to design crossing structures along I-15.
So it's got benefit all the way around, and we feel like it's well worth it, especially since those structures can last for many decades. So we're very excited about working with engineers and students at engineering schools to provide them with the exposure and the opportunity to work on these kinds of projects that benefit wildlife and not just cars.
Additionally, specially designed fencing along highways helps direct wildlife to safe crossing points and away from the roads. This has already shown positive results. On Route 241, wildlife casualties have dropped by 98%, making the roads safer for both humans and animals. In the Santa Monica Mountains, efforts to reconnect the natural habitat involve multiple partnerships.
Working on this campaign now to build a vegetated wildlife bridge over the 101 in the vicinity of Liberty Canyon, which is one of our last remaining spots in the mountains that has natural protected habitat on both ends.
Building the largest wildlife crossing in the world and also trying to save this population of mountain lions, it is all about partnerships and collaboration. And you know, one of the things I love about this campaign as well and the quest to do this is everybody's a partner, including the public. The public support for this is unprecedented. I've never seen anything like it.
In the Santa Cruz Mountains, researchers are also looking for ways to link lion populations.
There's plans now for 2 tunnels to go across Highway 17, one sort of on the southern Santa Cruz County side and the other on the Santa Clara side of the mountains. These are 2 places where our data has shown are important for mountain lions crossing. And now we're working on what is arguably the bigger problem, and that is isolation from the Santa Cruz Mountains to neighboring ranges.
If linking local populations is the first step, the next step is connecting lions statewide.
Not only are these wildlife crossing structures of these highways going to make it sure that wildlife can safely cross these highways, but it'll also ensure that there are less human-wildlife collisions on the highways.
It really behooves all of us to focus on solving the problem of wildlife being killed as part of our transportation infrastructure.
We really want to live in an environment where all the pieces are in place and they're all doing their job. And so we don't want, you know, the connectivity between these populations isn't just about mountain lions, it's about all the animals that are going to use these underpasses, these overpasses, these ways around a deadly freeway. I think we need to remember that as humans, we're not exempt from changes in our environment.
Connection truly is a word with many meanings, and to humans and mountain lions alike, it is an essential aspect of survival. As we begin to understand the importance of connectivity, we can take strides to reconnect isolated spaces. So thank you for watching this series and bringing awareness to this conflict. By connecting and collaborating with others, we all can ensure the survival of California mountain lions.